Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to Shloka Day. Today's Shloka is Shloka number 21, chapter 13. Karya Karana Kartrutve
Karya Kartritve
Etoh Prakritiruchyate
Etoh Prakritir Uchyate
Purusha Sukha Dukkhana
Purusha Sukha Dukkhanam
Bhoktritve Heturuchyate.
Putritve Heturuchyate.
Word meaning, translation, and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Karya, of effect, Karana, and cause, Kartritve, the matter of creation, Hetuhu, the instrument, Prakritihi, material nature, Uchyate, is said to be, Purushaha, the living entity, Sukha, of happiness, Dukkhanam, and distress, Bhoktritve, in enjoyment, Hetuhu, the instrument, Uchyate, is said to be. Translation: Nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects.
Is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects.
Whereas the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world.
Is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world.
So Prabhupada writes in the purport, the different manifestations of body and senses among the living entities are due to material nature. There are 84 lakh different species of life, and these varieties are creation of the material nature. Which means Prakriti has so many different varieties, and the core varieties that are being counted here is the various forms of bodies that Prakriti creates, which is 84 lakh different species. They arise from the different sensual pleasures of the living entity, who thus desires to live in this body or that, which means our desires are determining the kind of body that we inhabit. That means the body that you're inhabiting today is because of the desires that you have. When he is put into different bodies, he enjoys different kinds of happiness and distress. So maybe the happiness and distress of a dog will be very different than the happiness and distress of a human being. Definitely we can understand that a human being, because of his conditioning, he experiences such variety and differences in the types of happiness and distress. Happiness can be very intense and the distress can be very intense for him. His material happiness and distress are due to his body and not to himself as he is. In his original state, there is no doubt of enjoyment. Therefore, that is his real state, which means in our original spiritual state, we are anyway Satchidananda. We only experience bliss. But the minute we come into contact with Prakriti, that's when everything changes for us. Because of the desire to lord it over material nature, he is in the material world. One of the classes we were talking about, the wrong identity for us is that we think we are the master. We are actually the servant. We are the master. We pretend to be the master of Prakriti, but in reality, our real identity is that we are servant of Bhagavan. So because of this mistaken identity, we experience all these dualities. In the spiritual world, there is no such thing. The spiritual world is pure. But in the material world, everyone is struggling hard to acquire different kinds of pleasures for the body. So just in order to put food on the table, in order to purchase a house, whatever it is, we may have so many different desires, but we have to work so hard for it. Nothing comes easy to us. it might be more clear to state that this body is the effect of the senses, which means the senses are instruments for gratifying desire. So when we use these senses to gratify ourselves, that's when we experience duality. But when we use these senses to gratify the senses of the mind, then you are in your proper constitutional position. Now the sum total body and instrument senses is offered by material nature, and as will be clear in the next verse, the living entity is blessed or damned with circumstances according to his past desire and activity. According to one's desires and activities, material nature places one in various residential quarters. Residential quarters is the 84 lakh residential quarters. The being himself is the cause of his attaining such residential quarters and his attendant enjoyment or suffering, which means along with the body and the type of body that you're occupying, you will have that particular type of enjoyment or suffering. Once placed in some particular kind of body, he comes under the control of nature because the body, being matter, acts according to the laws of nature. So, the type of body that you occupy, as we were saying, whether you're in the body of a dog or a human being, determines the kind of experiences that you have. So, the dog cannot experience what a human being experiences to the full scale. So, the body in itself has to act according to the laws of nature. As soon as he is put into a body of a dog, he must act like a dog. He cannot act otherwise. And if the living entity is put into the body of a hog, then he is forced to eat stool and act like a hog. Similarly, if the living entity is put into the body of a demigod, he must act according to his body. This is the law of nature. But in all circumstances, the super soul is with the individual soul. That is explained in the Vedas, Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.1 as follows: Dva Suparna Sayujya Sakhaya. The Supreme Lord is so kind upon the living entity that he always accompanies the individual soul and in all circumstances is present as the soul of Paramatma. I think if you recall the single word summary of the 18 chapters, the single word summary for the 13th chapter is attorney. The Lord is always there to be your guide, to give you good counsel, to defend you. But then we have to want the Lord to act in that way in our lives. If we don't acknowledge the Lord, then of course he's just going to be a silent witness. He's not going to take any active part in your life. Here, we'll look at His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu's commentary. So in this verse, Krishna is talking about firstly, Purusha and Prakriti are eternal, but the changes are produced by Prakriti. So Purusha is eternal. Purusha here is the jivatma. Prakriti is also eternal. But what is causing us to experience all these changes? It's Prakriti. Then the question will come up, changes are produced by Prakriti. Is Prakriti experiencing emotions? Or who is experiencing emotions? Although the changes are imposed on us by Prakriti, it is the Purusha that is experiencing the emotions. And that is what is explained in the next verse, which is verse 22. Example, when a person watches the movie, the desire to watch the movie, bhokta means to enjoy, leads to Purushaha Sukha Dukkhana. There will be some happiness and some distress. And if the person decides not to watch the movie, then there is neither happiness nor the distress. Similarly, one experiences happiness and distress because of one's enjoying mentality, bhoktritva. Because of enjoying mentality, the person starts watching the movie, and because of that, happiness and distress come up. So even if there is no observer, certain things will be happening to the movie screen that is caused by Prakriti. So things will happen in the material world, but our enjoyment and distress depends on how much we identify with it, which means The more you identify with your body, the more you will have these extremes of happiness and distress. The more you identify with the soul, then you are in your proper constitutional position. So here Krishna is clearly differentiating matter and spirit. The soul becomes entangled because of bhoktritve. The mind wants to enjoy, so the soul feels entrapped. So what the person can do and what the person can't do, that is determined by the body the person is put into. Functions of body is largely determined by material nature. What is possible and what is not possible. But the consequences in terms of emotional responses of those actions, they are caused by bhoktritve. So one more slide by His Grace Chaitanya Sharan Prabhu, which makes it much more clearer. That means events are not in our control. But how we respond to those events, our experiences, they are under our control. So when things outside our control go wrong, we may get overwhelmed by feelings of helplessness. When we are not able to control events, we feel helpless. Such feelings can be crushing, especially when things that matter critically to us are falling apart and we find ourselves powerless to do anything to stop. So when you can't control things that are happening to you, then you feel powerless. Actually, however, there is always something we can do. We can change our interpretation of the reversal, thereby reshaping our response to it. So if we look at that event differently, then your response to it will also vary. Events in the outer world are not always under our control, but our experience of those events in our inner world is. The Bhagavad Gita 13.21 indicates that events in the outer world are determined by material nature, but their effect on us in terms of the pleasure or pain they cause is determined by our mentality. That is our worldview. If our worldview is primarily materialistic, then the falling apart of things in the outer world causes a corresponding quake in our inner world. With nothing unchangeable to hold on to, we fall apart internally. So that is why the Bhagavad Gita is all about inner resilience. Because if we don't develop inner resilience, the smallest of things, and it rattles us in a big way. But if we are educated in the spiritual worldview, we understand that we are at our core souls whom the worst worldly reversal can't even touch. We also understand that God, Krishna, loves us unfailingly and unflinchingly. He is always there by our side in our inner world, no matter what all and who all leaves our side in the outer world. And these spiritual realities are not just theoretical. They become accessible and relishable when we practice yoga, especially bhakti yoga. Such spiritual experiences provide us inner shelter and strength, thereby calming our heart and cooling our head. Then we can revisit the outer events without the burden of unnecessarily negative interpretations of those events, thereby discovering positives we had missed earlier. Thus, Gita wisdom, by empowering us to change our inner experiences, helps us respond better to outer events. So, as you can understand, by very meticulously studying the Bhagavad Gita, we are able to understand that ultimately we have to learn how to control ourselves. And the best way to learn and begin that process is to first fix your identity problem. So, the identity problem is that we have a tendency to identify with the body and not with the soul.
If you like our videos, please subscribe to our channel and turn on the bell notification. If you'd like to join our classes every day, please check the details in the description section of this video. We look forward to serving you.